It's June 17, 2024, the first official day of the PFT Live annual hiatus, which means it's the first official day of the PFT PM summertime hiatus-filling excursion, where I talk about whatever's happening in the NFL, and I answer some of your questions, and I try to keep it under an hour, which I'm definitely going to do this year. It doesn't need to be an hour long. You don't need to hear me talk for an hour, and I definitely don't want to talk for a full hour. Today, there's not an artificial deadline, a real deadline. There's a difference between the two. Real deadline, because at 12:10 Eastern, Pat McAfee is going to call in because, and this is good news, people are starting to realize the Sunday ticket trial, the massive antitrust action that's been in the court system for 9 years. Trial started on June 5. They're realizing it's a big deal. McAfee saw the article today about both Roger Goodell and Jerry Jones testifying this week. Goodell likely today, Jones possibly today. I doubt it's going to be today. I'll talk about that in a second. That got his attention. And that's one of the things that's been frustrating to me about this case. It's hard to find any accounts of what's going on in the courtroom because it's not being covered like other big trials are covered. And I've got a Google alert set. I get on Google and I search every day, multiple times a day. Is there some new story? Is there some account of documents or evidence or arguments or testimony that would help me better understand it so I can explain to you what's happening? So I'll be talking to him about that in about 35 minutes. That gives me 35 minutes to get through everything I want to talk about today. And I'm going to start with this Sunday ticket trial because it is a big deal for Roger Goodell and Jerry Jones to be testifying. I believe they're testifying in the defendant's case in chief. Every once in a while, aggressive lawyers will actually call one of the key witnesses from the other side as part of their case in chief. That's risky. That's risky because you're basically putting a hostile witness on the stand. But sometimes you need that in order to prove all the elements of your case. In this case, based upon what I saw last week, the defense is now in its case in chief. It's calling witnesses and it's putting on Roger Goodell and Jerry Jones. And we'll see how they do. How they do on direct versus how they do on cross is two different things. And I read earlier this year the 400-page transcript of the deposition that Roger Goodell gave in the case that's still pending on the question of whether or not the NFL will be able to get insurance coverage for the massive class action concussion settlement from more than 10 years ago, but it finally was approved and went into effect probably 7 or 8 years ago. They want to get insurance money to pay for what they spent on this big fund that is used for former players who have any type of cognitive issue. There's certain formulas and procedures you get paid based upon what condition you have, how long you played, et cetera, et cetera. They want to send the bill for all of that to the insurance providers. And Goodell in July of 2022 was questioned at length in a deposition. Now, when you're in a deposition, there's greater freedom to be an asshole if you're inclined to do that because there's no judge. I know if you saw the Office episode where Michael Scott's being deposed in Jan's lawsuit against Dunder Mifflin, there's a judge in the room. There's no judge in the room at a deposition. It's the lawyers, it's a court reporter, and that's it. Now, if there's an issue that comes up, you can call the judge. If there's an argument over what's proper and what's not proper, that's a bold move if you make. If you bother the judge with a question from a deposition in one of his or her pending cases, you could piss the judge off. But it's just the lawyers. And a lot of times what happens when you've got somebody who is powerful, who is rich, who is used to having everyone around that person cater to them and do what they want and submit to their authority, those people don't like to submit to anyone else's authority. And when you get into a deposition setting and there's a lawyer who is asking a bunch of tough pointed questions and not letting you off the hook, and it's not like a press conference where somebody asks you a question, you really didn't want to answer it, word salad, somebody else asks a completely different question, whew, crisis averted. When you're in a deposition setting, if you try word salad in response to a tough question, you know what happens? They ask the question again. And if you go word salad, they ask it again. And the various ingredients of the word salads become fodder for follow-up questions. So it can get very tense. It can get awkward. And I know from reading the 400-page deposition transcript from a couple of years ago with Goodell in that insurance coverage case, I could tell he was pissed a few times. And it's one thing to do it in that setting. It's another thing to do it on the witness stand, open court, judge there, jury there. So we'll see whether or not he can submit as needed to the authority of the court and how he'll handle the lawyer. Now, we won't see it because obviously it's not on TV. We'll see what the news accounts are. I don't know if transcripts are available on a regular basis. I haven't seen any, but I, just as recovering lawyer, 15 years removed from when I last really practiced, I'd love to see. And, you know, if I had the time, Peter King texted over the weekend, hey, you should really have somebody in the room every day for this trial. And it's like, yeah, that's easier said than done for a variety of reasons, because our business in large part relies on quantity, and our writers are constantly looking for new stories. And I don't know how much our readers care about this case, although I think they care about it more than most legal cases. And they definitely care about the fact that no one else is talking about it, writing about it, trying to explain what it's all about. And at the core, it's as simple as this. The NFL is not one business. The NFL is 32 distinct businesses. Therefore, the NFL is subject to the requirements of the antitrust laws. Now, there are different types, and I was never an antitrust law expert, but you can't come together as distinct businesses and set prices or determine the labor market or just otherwise do things that don't reflect competition among 32 distinct businesses. And there was a case in 2010 from the U.S. Supreme Court, the American Needle case, that was critical to what was looming in the NFL. The lockout was coming, and the NFLPA's first order of business when the league locks them out is to, and there's a technical term for it, disclaim interest, I think is the word, or words, they shut down the union. And when you shut down the union, that takes away the antitrust exemption that applies to a multi-employer bargaining unit. And I know that's a big legal sounding word, but basically what it means is the union encompasses all 32 teams. And all 32 teams come together for one bargaining unit, the NFL players. That gives the league the ability at the bargaining table to negotiate salary caps, minimum salaries, free agency, the draft, everything that would be an antitrust violation if these were 32 different businesses who weren't one business and were subject to the antitrust laws. So the NFL, in some circumstances, has the exemption, like when dealing with the union. Under the broadcast antitrust exemption, they can sell the big packages to the various networks. The limits of that are being tested by this case, because the argument is that the premium product that the NFL has created, Sunday Ticket, and the NFL's alleged, if not actual, practice of forcing the Sunday Ticket provider to charge so much that a certain percentage of people who would otherwise get Sunday Ticket just watch what's on Fox or CBS in their local markets. That's where the antitrust violation fundamentally and primarily comes from. That the NFL is fixing prices in violation of the antitrust law, holding Sunday Ticket at a number that scares people away so they'll watch the Sunday afternoon games that are available to them, far less freedom of choice in that setting. That's really what it's about. And I think subsumed within that is this idea of, why can't we just get Sunday Ticket one team at a time? Why can't we get one weekend at a time? Why can't we get one game at a time? Why do we have to buy the whole thing? So that's what the case is all about. And that's why I've been saying, number one, if the NFL loses, there could be a huge, gigantic verdict against the NFL. Big judgment, especially because antitrust cases, damages get trebled. Also, it could force the NFL to say, hey, how do we prevent the next antitrust case? That's what college football and other NCAA sports are currently doing, because they've been losing antitrust cases about rules that they, as a bunch of different businesses operating under the auspices of the NCAA, have broken the law with NIL, with this, with that. So how do you prevent it in the future? The fact that they allowed NIL to happen 3 years ago was a recognition of the fact that we're going to get sued into oblivion if we don't. So what will the NFL do based upon this verdict to change its business practices so it doesn't get another antitrust law and another, and it just keeps going indefinitely? Now, the silver bullet for the NFL, I mentioned this on Pardon My Take, and the goal here is not to be political. The goal is to be pragmatic. The NFL will, I believe, appeal this thing all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And given the way the U.S. Supreme Court is currently constituted, 6-3 conservative majority, conservative judges tend to be pro-business. That's the way it goes. That's the way it is. When I practiced law, there were certain judges that if you were representing an employer who was being sued, it was good for you. There were certain judges, it's bad for you. Judges, it's good for you if you've got the individual. It's not good if you're trying to represent the individual against a big company. That's a huge part of how these cases get resolved. And I think the NFL is confident that as the court is currently put together, they'll win ultimately on the arguments that they previously made. Because what happened was, when they filed the suit, the judge in California presiding over the case threw it out, granted the NFL's motion to dismiss. But the appeals court, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, reinstated it. That's one of the reasons why it's taken 9 years to get here. So if the NFL would lose, and if it would be whatever verdict, I'm sure the NFL will appeal anything that goes adverse to it in this all the way to the Supreme Court, because it wants to be able to keep doing business the way it's been doing business. I think that's where it's going to go. So it's been around for 9 years, maybe it'll be around for 9 more years. Bottom line, though, is for now, it's in court, it's happening, Goodell and Jones, and let's see what kind of coaching they've gotten from their lawyers, and let's see whether or not they listen. You know, Jerry, and I made this point earlier, he's that guy that thinks he can sweet talk his way out of any jam, throw in a wink or two from time to time, and word salad, they'll move on to the next topic. Good lawyers will let the witness ramble for as long as the witness wants to, and take notes for where follow-up questions may come from that meandering answer, and then get back to the question that wasn't answered, because the word salad was what was served up instead of the answer to what often is a very simple question. And that's the art of cross-examination. You want to craft your questions so they are closed-ended, yes or no, undeniable. They can either agree with me, or they're going to eventually look like they're not telling the truth, or they're so concerned with winning the case that they've allowed that to get in the way of just basic logic and common sense. All right, so that's where we are on that. We'll have more updates at PFT, and we'll see who testifies today. I suspect at most it'll be Goodell. I doubt, because they had an economic expert who was in the middle of cross-examination that needed to go back on the witness stand, and they're probably just getting started out there. It's 11:47 a.m. Eastern as I speak. I think if they get through Goodell today, that'll be a win. And if I'm the lawyer for the plaintiffs who's going to be cross-examining Goodell, I want to be able to work tonight on coming up with more cross questions based upon what he says on direct. It's always good to have that overnight period to think of things that you otherwise aren't coming up with on the fly. They'll come to it with a plan of questions they want to ask him, but then that plan is going to get revised based upon what he actually testifies to. And if you have more time to just refine it, to brainstorm, to really package something that's going to be the most impactful that it can to the jury, that's the way to go. All right, that's all I have to say about that. We've been talking a lot about quarterbacks. And I thought of something this morning about one quarterback who is going to be due for a new contract after the 2024 regular season ends. And remember, that's the rule, dating back to the 2011 CBA. Before that, you could renegotiate contracts after 2 years. The 2011 CBA, for draft picks, you have to wait 3 years. And the way it's written, you are eligible for a second contract at the conclusion of the third regular season. And I've been waiting for someone who becomes eligible for a new contract at the conclusion of the third regular season to get the contract before the playoff game. And I think that's particularly relevant to Brock Purdy. And it's relevant to the 49ers. You know, you could say, well, the 49ers don't want to do this. Why wouldn't you want to do it if you're the 49ers? And what I'm getting at is this. Have a contract ready to go with Brock Purdy as soon as this regular season ends. An offer that gets put on the table, and they know it's coming, and here it is. As soon as the regular season is over, here's your offer, and you can accept it, you can get your financial security, and you can shift the injury risk to us as soon as this postseason. You don't have to get through any playoff games. Because what it ordinarily would be is, hey, you finish your third year, now we'll consider signing you to a new contract. That happened with Joe Burrow. It happened with Justin Herbert. It happened with Trevor Lawrence. Hasn't happened with Tua. Didn't happen with Dak. But when we consider the fact that the price is always going to go up, and we consider the fundamental consideration here, the guy just wants to get his reward. Is it ever going to be cheaper than it would be if the 49ers would do it as soon as the regular season ends? And Purdy would be more inclined to take it then. And you can couch it. If you're the 49ers, and I've looked at the CBA on this, there's nothing that stops the 49ers and Purdy's agent from talking about this. They can negotiate this. They just can't do it until the regular season ends. So they can have everything ready to go, and Purdy knows it's coming, and Purdy wants it. He wants his financial security as soon as he can get it. And the 49ers should want to give it to him as soon as they can, because it's always going to get more expensive. I mean, think of it this way. If you wait until after the playoffs, okay, how much time do you have before Dak Prescott gets his new deal, whether from the Cowboys or becomes a free agent? There's going to be other quarterbacks that get new contracts. That pressure is going to keep pushing higher and higher and higher. We've seen it over the past 4 or 5 weeks between Jared Goff and more recently, Trevor Lawrence. So I think that Purdy could be, and maybe should be, the first one to get his second contract right after the regular season ends and before the playoffs start, assuming the 49ers make the playoffs. I don't think that's a stretch. They don't make the playoffs, it's a non-issue. But the whole idea is swoop in and get it done while he's in a position where he's carrying that injury risk. And look what happened to him 2 years ago. NFC Championship game. What happened? He had that elbow injury. He knows what can happen. He's lived it. He's endured it. So this is a way to do right by him and to do right by yourself. Because, again, it's never going to be cheaper than it is the first moment you can sign him. It's only going to go up. It's only going to get more expensive unless you want to bet against your guy. Unless your attitude is, let's see you deal with the injury risk. Let's see if you're healthy on the other side of this postseason. That's just not a way to run a football team. That's not a way to believe in your guys. You want to believe in your guys. You want to bet on your guys. You don't want to bet against your guys. So I thought of that this morning, and it's something I'm going to be paying attention to. Will the 49ers sign Brock Purdy after the regular season ends, but before the first playoff game? Now, if they get the bye in the NFC, that gives them even more time to get a deal done. And it makes it even more sensible to get a deal done. So keep an eye on that, because he's the guy. And I said this on PFT Live recently. I don't want to hear how Brock Purdy's getting screwed this year. There's nothing he can do about it. He's not getting screwed by the team. He's getting screwed by the system. And think about this. If he hadn't been drafted in the last spot of the 2022 draft, and if he'd signed with the 49ers as an undrafted free agent, he would have been eligible for his new contract after 2 years. That's all the more reason for the 49ers to be ready to take care of this as soon as the 2024 regular season ends. We'll see if they do. We'll see if they do. Somebody needs to do it. And I don't know how the league would feel about it. This gets back to collusion, and the management council frowns on this and frowns on that. I think it just makes sense to smile at the possibility of getting this deal done before he has to play in a playoff game, because I think maybe they can get themselves a better deal. And I think that Brock Purdy would be inclined to say yes. All right. Those are the only two. Oh, congratulations to the UFL Birmingham Stallions. I guess they're a dynasty now as spring football goes. They won both USFL championships. Then the USFL merges with the XFL, and the Stallions win that 25-0 over the San Antonio Brahmas. The Brahmas, the only team that beat Birmingham in the regular season. They had like a 15-game winning streak, something ridiculous like that before the Brahmas beat them a few weeks ago. So the Stallions get revenge. The Stallions get the trophy, and the UFL will return next year. And they're not sure when it's going to start next year. Maybe it starts closer in time to the Super Bowl. There's going to be Fox games on Friday nights because they've got an IndyCar contract. They need the windows on the weekend. So that's kind of a little bit of a slap in the face at the UFL. But they've got some things to do to improve not the product, but the presentation and the strategy. I've said before they should have kept the XFL kickoff this year. It would have gotten some interest from NFL fans who want to see what this thing's all about. This kickoff that the NFL has adopted. It really is weird to think the NFL has adopted a kickoff that the XFL abandoned when it merged with the USFL to make the UFL, and they used the USFL kickoff instead. It's just weird to think that's what the NFL took. So they could have done that, missed opportunity. They need to be in markets that operate more like St. Louis. They had 27,000 people in St. Louis yesterday for a game between Birmingham and San Antonio. Are you kidding me? That's more than any of the other cities drew all year long. Birmingham had a playoff game last week, and they take half the stadium and wall it off. The other half of the stadium, it was still spotty. I think it was like 12,000. So they need to think about, and I think the most obvious destinations are cities the NFL has left: San Diego, Oakland, and then just like rabid football cities that have a big population base. You know, the more people you have, the more people are going to show up. New York, Chicago, LA. It's just kind of surprising that there hasn't been as much focus on good business strategy for these spring leagues. And that's one of the reasons why they failed. You need to be making good decisions. You need to be thinking about how your league fits into the broader sports ecosystem. You need to schedule games accordingly. And the potential's there for one of these to make enough money and to keep going. And I think the UFL, maybe learning from the failures of the AAF and then the XFL when it returned. Of course, it got screwed by the pandemic. It was doing pretty well in 2020. The USFL did okay. You bring them together, and I think they're doing well enough that it could survive. And I know from the games I watched this year, I thought it was enjoyable. I thought there was potential there. All right, I'm going to see what questions I have. Let's see what we got. Let's see. All right. Scrolling through here. Here's one from PFT PM Posse, who can be sometimes counted on for good questions. Sometimes I regret that I read the question. Let's see how I feel after I read this one. A lot of players are represented by multiple agents, and players can talk to/negotiate with teams if they self-represent. Why doesn't a player co-represent himself along with an NFL certified agent, thereby allowing teams and players to talk directly and avoid BS tampering charges? Look, first of all, I just don't think it's possible. It's one or the other. It's binary. You either have to be represented by an NFLPA certified agent or represent yourself. You can't co-represent yourself with your agent. And, you know, that doesn't change the fact that, and we've heard these stories before as it relates to the Cowboys, where teams will talk directly to a player who is represented by an NFLPA certified agent. If I'm the agent, I'm saying, no. You don't talk to my guy. I talk to my guy. You don't talk to my guy. You know, they'll like to throw the arm around the guy and, aw shucks this, and what the Cowboys do, the power of the star and all the money you can make off the field. You don't want your relationship with your client to be undermined by the team going directly to him. And then the team will try to play the client against the agent. It turns into a big mess. So it's just not possible to co-represent player representing himself plus agent. And I don't know that it would be a good idea if it was even allowed. Another one from PFT PM Posse. I didn't really regret the first one. I kind of regretted it, but that's okay. They all can't be winners, as Bad Santa once said when he was explaining the advent calendar to Thurman Merman that Billy Bob had invaded and eaten all the chocolate and replaced it with things like, I think, a medicine and what's that thing called? what's that little Halloween treat called? Why am I blanking? Candy corn. Candy corn. Why would I blank on? See, anytime I do that now, I think, is it starting? Is the decline, the inevitable decline of not knowing what my name is that beginning? PFT PM posse, are we finally starting to see more and more straight up contracts that have little to no fluff / bullshit in them? Seems like less of them have the Fugazi BS years on them. If so, why now? I think that it's not any type of epiphany that anyone's had. I just think that some deals have Fugazi back ends and some deals don't. The Amon-Ra St. Brown deal has some stuff on the back end that pushes it to 30. It does. It does. And the two big ones out there that are going to be a problem, the Tyreek Hill deal, which has a phony final year of $45 million to push the new money average to 30. The Alvin Kamara deal, which has a phony final year of $25 million to push the average to 15. That becomes an issue because the bigger the old money is, the harder it is to put together a contract with the new money average that gets you to where you want to be. And I don't want to bore everyone to tears any more than I already do, but just trust me on that. So I just think it's a mistake to do it. It completely warps the priorities. And I've had players tell me that all players care about is the APY, average per year. They don't care about state income tax. They don't care about cash flow. They don't care about guarantees. They just care about APY because that's one of the ways that the hierarchy in the locker room is determined. Hey, they were calling Jalen Waddle, both Tyreek Hill and Odell Beckham Jr. were calling him 28 after he signed his contract with a new money average of $28.25 million. They're aware of that. They're competitive about everything. When we talked about the gambling angle between Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors and the $10,000 goes to which of the two of them ends up being the offensive rookie of the year, you just don't talk about it out loud because they're competing about everything. They're gambling about everything. They are wired to be competitive. They want to win at everything. We've talked about that about quarterbacks in the past. Win at ping pong, win at pool, win at cards, win at Monopoly, win at shuffleboard, win at this. And I've made the point, when a kid is that way, we try to parent him out of that mindset. Jimmy, let the other kids win sometimes. You don't have to win everything. When it's adult, we're like, oh, this is an admirable quality. Oh, he acts like he's having a temper tantrum when he loses a game of Uno. So anyway, what's the point? Oh, yeah, I still think that desire to have massive APY is going to cause some agents and players to use the Fugazi contracts. And from the agent's perspective, it's the same thing. They use that to recruit more clients. Hey, look what I got for this guy. Never mind the fact that it's bullshit and it's never that number and he's never going to make that number. Look what I got. Look what I got. All right. Scrolling through some of these, don't have a whole lot of time left. CJ Newman, which UFL player do you think should be signed to an NFL team? I don't know about should. I mean, Hakeem Butler, Wade Phillips made the pitch last week and said to Butler after the game, he's the receiver from the St. Louis Battlehawks. I'm going to call my people around the league and get you an NFL job. And I saw that a couple teams are interested. There will be plenty of teams looking at plenty of UFL players. Those reps give guys a chance to shine. Look at Jake Bates, who's going to sign with the Lions this week. He made 3 field goals of 60 yards or longer in the building where the Lions play their home games. It's opportunities to get attention drawn to guys who otherwise would not have those opportunities. So I think it's a good thing. And I guarantee you, if the NFL thought it was profitable, it would have a development league. But the NFL doesn't care about development. It doesn't matter. Why care? We got 53 roster spots, and the competitions get decided. Training camp, preseason, and into the regular season. Go. You guys figure it out. We're not spending the money on a developmental league that we're not going to see profit from. If they thought they were going to see profit, they would have already had it in place. Connor Rutledge, which NFL matchup are you most excited to see this season and why? I was really jazzed up and still am, but not as much because it's not on Thanksgiving. I wanted the Cowboys and Texans game to be a Thanksgiving game. I thought that would have been great. Any of these Chiefs games against high-profile teams, the Bengals, it's early this year, which is good. Last year it was New Year's Eve, and Joe Burrow was injured by the time it happened. The week one, I mean, I know I'm a little shill here, but Ravens, Chiefs to start the season. The Chiefs are just fun to watch because I was saying this also last night on Pardon My Take. Unlike other dynasties, which will hit this groove where they're beating the hell out of everybody. The Chiefs always do it the hard way. The Chiefs always make it exciting. You know that Batman isn't going to die, but it's fun to watch the movie where Batman almost dies 20 different times. That's what makes the Chiefs so much fun to watch. And even though it feels like there's inevitability that they're going to win it all, I mean, hell, the floor for Patrick Mahomes in 6 years as a starter is losing in overtime of the AFC Championship. He's never done worse than that in any season of his career as a starter. So it's fun to watch their games. Black Friday, Raiders, Chiefs. It's just fun to watch Chiefs games. So there'll be other teams that'll be fun to watch this year and some teams we're not thinking about. But see, the problem is the way they do that scheduling, they make the bet on which teams they think are going to be compelling. So last year, when the Texans ended up being compelling, all those games were at 1 o'clock Eastern on Sunday, and we didn't get to see many of them. So hopefully a lot of the standalone primetime games will deliver this year. But anytime it's the Chiefs, it's worth watching. Jesse Drebit. I recently watched the O.J. Made in America documentary by ESPN Films. Again, that came out in 2016. Since today is the 30-year anniversary of the Bronco chase. Is it today? Was it June 17? Where were you when it happened? I remember exactly where I was. My wife's, and we weren't married yet. We got married August 26 of 94. So if this was June 17, it was a Friday night. We were at her parents' house, which later became my law office. I bought their house and made it my law office. They moved from Clarksburg to Bridgeport, and they've lived in the same house there since 2001. But we're watching on one of those old, big, wooden, plastic, it looks wooden, but it's really plastic TVs with the cathode ray tube. And it was the NBA game, Rockets-Knicks, right? And split screen with the Bronco chase. And I just remember thinking, at the time, this guy's absolutely guilty. The only question is he going to kill himself at some point between now and the time they take him into custody? And they were concerned he was going to. And he almost got shot by the police because he had that gun and he had to give it up or they were going to take him out. So I remember that very well. It's just one of those things. I had a class one time in college, I think, that delved into the psychology of the way moments get burned into our brains collectively. When JFK was shot, when the Challenger blew up, when 9/11 happened, and this falls into that category as well. Anybody that witnessed that knows where they were, knows what they were doing, and you can almost like press a button and it starts to play again. All right, let's see what else we have here. Should probably wrap this up. Scrolling through. Sorry. Here we go. Nah, I'm gonna go. I'm passing that one up. Do you see the Steelers? This is Andrew Tate is the GOAT. Do you see the Steelers making a significant upgrade to the receiver room before training camp? Mark Caboli of The Athletic had written a week or two ago that they're likely to bring in a number 2 receiver before the season begins. The clock is ticking. I mean, you want to get the guy there before training camp starts. It's hard to get a guy up to speed. They're calling me now. I hate to do this. I got to take this. That's it for today's PFT PM. The McAfee Show is calling. Check me out there. Check me out at PFT. Have a great day. See you next time. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.